Welcome to New York Symposium with Diane Sayre. You've just heard a performance of the Star Spangled Banner performed by the Schiller Institute New York City Chorus, which was conducted by Diane. In 2014, Diane uh, also created a chorus called the New York City Schiller Institute Chorus. That chorus that course was started in response to the um, killing of Eric Garner. Diane's now a candidate for the United States Senate running against the senator from Wall Street, Chuck Schumer. Lyndon LaRouche, the economist and statesman who lived in New York City from 1952 until 1974, was a kind of mentor for Diane and for many other people. What we're going to do tonight is to conduct a symposium about his economic policy versus the economic policy of Chuck Schumer, Wall Street, the City of London, and those that are now involved in something called the Great Reset. So without further introduction, Diane Sayre.
I unmuted my video, but not my audio. There we go. Thanks very much. So we are in a time where
I like Tiffany Haddish one.
Okay, where it's really like George Orwell's 1984, or what Bertrand Russell, the British philosopher Satanist, said, which is, can you make people believe, can you make people say that snow is black? And can you determine, he said, the most important science will be mass psychology. What can you figure out what it will cost per child to indoctrinate them so that they believe that snow is black? And he said many other things, including that you had to do something to stop population growth, and that if you could get a Black death once per generation, he said then people could procreate freely. The state of affairs might be somewhat unpleasant, but really high-minded people are indifferent to happiness, especially other people's. And Lyndon LaRouche said that Bertrand Russell was the most evil man of the 20th century, 19th and 20th centuries. I mean, absolutely satanic. He also proposed that we should obliterate the Soviet Union with nuclear weapons before they could develop a nuclear bomb. Now, I bring that up because what's happened is we first of all had this election, which was rife with irregularities, and there is great reason to not be confident that the current president is the legitimately elected president. In fact, he is not, I would assert. But Biden made a speech at the State Department today on foreign policy, and I think this is really part of this Bertrand Russell idea, where you just tell people the exact opposite. His speech was covered in the Washington Post and other places as being that of a great peacekeeper, but I'm going to read you a little teeny bit of what he said. He said, American leadership must meet this new moment of advancing authoritarianism, including the growing ambitions of China to rival the United States, and the determination of Russia to damage and disrupt our democracy. Now, first of all, is it bad for a nation to develop and get itself out of poverty? Why should we be threatened by a nation that wants to, quote, rival us? In fact, wouldn't it be something if a nation that was totally impoverished quickly ended up with a higher standard of living than we have in the United States? Then you might ask, well, why aren't we doing the same thing? And he goes on, he says, by leading with diplomacy, and we must also mean engaging our adversaries and competitors diplomatically, but at the same time, I made it clear to President Putin, in a manner very different from my predecessor, that the days of the United States rolling over in the face of Russia's aggressive actions interfering with our elections, cyber attacks, poisoning its citizens are over. We will not hesitate to raise the cost on Russia. Okay, the politically motivated jailing of Alexei Navalny and the Russian efforts to suppress freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. We don't have that in the United States. This video that we're doing right now could be taken down just because I said that I don't think that Biden won the election. We have no freedom of speech in this country right now, at least by the tech giants in their control. And then he says, we'll take directly the challenges posed by our prosperity, security, and democratic values by our most serious competitor, China. We'll confront China's economic abuses, counter its aggressive, coercive action, push back on China's attack on human rights, intellectual property, and global governance. So a completely Orwellian fallacy, I mean, just a total lie from beginning to end. They have more free speech in Russia right now than we do in the United States and in China as well. And what's authoritarian about them is that these nations have refused to roll over for the central banks, that they are insisting, one, that they don't want to be part of a geopolitical perpetual war game. Putin also had very sharp comments on the, and the Russian spokesperson for the Kremlin, Maria Zakharova, about the banning of President Trump from his Twitter and Facebook accounts right before the election. And Xi Jinping at Davos just very steadfastly asserted the right of China to look out for the well-being of its people. So they are giving lip service to the Green New Deal, but actually they're going to be continuing to build coal-fired power plants through at least about 2050. And the only reason they're phasing out is they're going nuclear, and not only nuclear fission, but fusion. They intend to have commercial fusion reactors by the year 2040, which is much cleaner, denser energy than anything we have today. So the United States will be attacking these nations under Biden. So it's an extremely dangerous situation, and therefore not surprising what we're going to hear tonight from our guests, my guests, about the situation in New York, in the NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority, the situation of the homeless in the city and the programs and what's being done there. And when we get to the discussion period, because I want to get right to allowing other people to speak, but I will say more about what the solutions have to be. And the solutions are not local. They will be national and international. So I will stop right there.
Okay, so we were having a few technical problems there initially, but I think we're all right now. I hope we're all right now. And I just want to welcome our guests for this evening, Jose Vega, Maria Tejada, Devon Nash, and Lonnie Wolf. And rather than my introducing each one of them, I think they can each speak for themselves as they go ahead. So Jose, you're up first, and take it away.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I just want to address some of the technical issues before I begin. I know on YouTube there was no video. We're not too sure why that was the case. It just started working when I moved my mouse to the window. And on Facebook, there was no sound. Again, I don't know why until we just did something to fix it. But it should be addressed now. It should be fixed now. In order for me to begin my presentation, I actually had a video which Kynan, if you able to, could you please share the video that I asked you to prepare?
One tenant's weekend was anything but relaxing in Morris Heights. His apartment damaged, causing severe flooding.
News to the Bronx reporter Aisha McKenzie went to East 177th Street to check it out.
Friday, just half of that wall came down.
Jose Vega sending the cell phone video to News 12 of the aftermath of his ceiling dropping onto the floor, causing his Morris Heights basement apartment to become an unsanitary mess.
Super said he stopped the water, and yet the water still kept falling.
In just one weekend, Vega's comfy home of 5 years becoming almost unlivable.
How uncomfortable am I feeling in my own home? Everything has been flipped upside down. If I'm not careful, I can't get sleep because it'll just seep into the rooms.
He says he called his landlord multiple times to tell him about the gaping hole in the ceiling and the water him and his mother have had to mop out the door.
We get a hold of the landlord on Sunday. He told my mother, hey, if you want, I can rip up the lease we just signed a week ago and just get your things out and leave within these 3 days, and I'll completely forget all about it.
And why didn't you want to do that?
I didn't want to do that because he was subjecting us and treating us like animals, as if we were just worthless and that he was just going to kick us out.
We contacted the landlord, and he tells us he's aware of the problems, that a super went by to fix the pipes, and up next is a ceiling that he tells us will be fixed by the end of the day. In Morris Heights, Aisha McKenzie, News 12, The Bronx.
So nothing was fixed. No super came by to fix the pipes. That was all a pipe dream, actually. And I was in that situation for almost a month. But however, in that month, I took a very proactive measure and I went to go visit my representatives. I went to the office of Fernando Cabrera, and where I met his chief of staff, whose name escapes me at the moment. His first name was Greg. And the chief of staff was very supportive at first. He said he had seen that news segment there. And he told me that it was good that I went to him and took some action. And then he wrote down a few notes and then he said he'd get back to me. So I, again, took a proactive approach and I went again the next day, even though he hadn't contacted me. And so he told me, look, make sure you keep paying your rent there. Make sure that they don't, give you a reason to evict you. And that to make sure to keep paying my rent on time. And I really didn't appreciate that because we've always paid our rent on time, but I didn't feel it was justified for me to pay my rent if I couldn't even live there. Now, the name of the lease, the name on the lease was my mother's name. And unbeknownst to me, this chief of staff of Fernando Cabrera, who's a local councilman, was calling my mom and saying, look, your son has acquired a lawyer. And I did find a lawyer who said he'd take the case pro bono. And he said, you should be careful because if your son takes this to court, your name's going to be on a record and you will forever have a problem finding an apartment in the city because all landlords are going to look at you as somebody who takes landlords to court. And no landlord ever wants to deal with that. So you should seriously reconsider that. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that this guy was doing that to my mom until way after. And so, again, I would keep visiting. He'd tell me the same thing every day. We're working on it. We'll figure something out. And then finally, on the last day that I visited him, he told me straight up that if somebody offered me $15,000, would I take it and just let this whole thing drop? And that it was as ominous as it sounds. Why is this guy telling me that somebody can offer me $15,000 as a settlement when we just let this go? And that really annoyed me because this guy's supposed to be a councilman. I know I'm not the only one who's having these issues. And I'm sure that there are immigrants who can't speak a lick of English who would have just dropped everything. So I told him no, unless they offered me $999 million. And he said, that's ridiculous. Don't be stupid. Use the money that you can get and buy a proper lawyer. And then you can organize and fight social justice for housing in New York City, for proper housing in New York City, or use it to go to school, because at the time I was going to Bronx Community College and I had dropped out to fight this case. Overall, I couldn't go anywhere because my mom was intimidated by the landlord and by the councilman. And I'm not afraid to say that. That's just what happened. She was intimidated on all fronts by the people who were supposedly supposed to represent her and me. And I was defeated. Eventually, the landlord unlawfully changed the locks on the doors without informing us while our name was still in the lease. And he rented it out to another family despite us having 6 months left on the lease. And for a moment, I was upset and I didn't know what to do. And 2 months later, I had the opportunity actually to fly out to South Dakota to help somebody on their campaign. And that's where I learned this is not a single issue. It's not an issue. The whole, what I experience and what many people experience is a national issue.
It is a symptom. These are just terrible symptoms of a disease known as Wall Street, the the banks, and the City of London that play with our lives as if it's just toys and that we're just big experiments of them. And that's why I've dedicated my life to working with the LaRouche organization and working on Diane's campaign, because I know unless you have a program where you can have people between the ages of 16 and 28 and who can go and develop their minds and develop their skills and to actually rebuild the infrastructure, rebuild housing, maintain housing, make better advancements in methods of transportation and in the medical infrastructure, there's going to be more ceilings that fall apart. There's going to be more evictions, and there's going to be more people starving or going to be homeless or who will forever be in the homeless shelter. So I just put this out there to say that you can't see these issues as single issues, because if you get caught up in them, you can't change anything. But you have to think about things from a top-down approach, because only then you can address everything and everyone and make everything better, and you can get everyone truly active this way. And I'm not qualified to tell you exactly how that looks. That's what Diane's here for, and that's what Dennis Speed is here for. And I'm only learning, but I would just ask that people join us in this fight to really figure out what the problem is, and how to solve it. And I just gave you an example of the corruption that exists in the people who are supposed to represent you. And hopefully we're going to hear some uplifting and optimistic solutions. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Jose. Maria, you're up.
Hi, I am so happy to be right now with all you guys. I am very concerned about the Naisha situation. I have 9 years living in Naisha. I am very concerned about the homelessness situation that we have. We have homeless people living in this building. I have one that he have 9 years. I have 9 years living here, and he was living before in the apartment beside. And the person in charge of the apartment was evicted, and the guy, he have a lot of mental issue, schizophrenia, HIV, a lot of issue he has. It seems like he only recognized my building and my floor. He's all the time. His name is Danny. Right now, I am very worried about our situation in Asia is not easy with him. First, because he's really sick. I believe that he will very soon die. He seems like he have a lot of health issue and nobody is paying attention. He's using the stairs like his private shelter, our lobby. He's 24 hours with us. I believe that he's also part of us. For me, I am a little bit angry because I have been calling 311, 911 in order to solve the situation. I am right now more concerned about his health and he as a human being, plus the situation that we have that I use all the stairs all the time. And you need to come and see what's going on. He's doing pee, he's doing everything over there, and the lobby is his living room. Plus, I am concerned about his mental health issue. Also, I am concerned because the resident right now feel like he's one of our member of the family, and everybody is trying to protecting him. By protecting him, I believe that we are doing wrong, but at the same time, we are human beings. We are brothers and sisters. I am very concerned about his situation. They agreed to come. I went to the prison. The prison also is involved, prison number 7. And I believe that everybody's throwing the towel. I sent 3 formal letters to Naisha, the top and 250 Broadway. They receive it. They agreed to speak to me. And what they say in one of the letters, you need to call NYPD. NYPD will not be resolving this issue. I believe that they need to find somebody to come, take this person, take it to the shelter. Most of the time, he have a cycle. The cycle going back and forth to Bellevue Hospital. he come back clean, and the 3 or 4 days he's already mess. I am concerned about my building. I am concerned even living in Naisha, because they are like they are doing a lot of stuff that there is not fair. It's not fair for Danny as a homeless. It's not fair for the resident. And I believe that right now with the COVID-19, we are exposing people to all the hygiene issue that he have. That's me. It's a big problem that I believe that we need to continue pushing. I will be continue pushing. And I'm so glad to be working with the campaign. We have a lot of issues that we need to solve in Naisha. And I am so glad to be part of the campaign with Diane, because right now we have a lot of problem. We will try to solve this issue, and that's my part tonight. I am very, very concerned about the resident. I am concerned even the vision, like today, I am receiving I am waiting for my money for unemployment, and they are sending letter without sending a rent demand first in order to get the money. And this is like a no coordination, what they are doing with the resident. This is with me. Everybody knows me. Everybody knows that I am very involved with them. I work with the supervisor. I work with even with the worker, because I am the one who clean the stairs most of the time. Most of the time I am training the night shift worker, because I am here, but I want to do something different to motivate the resident, because I believe that night shift workers are doing their part. It's enough, because they have a lot of building around my place. But at the same time, we need to educate the resident. We need to educate the resident to be part of the community. They need to be together with me, in order that together we will be stronger, and we can fight the fight with whatever, most than fight, because I don't want to use the word fight all the time. We need to solve by speaking, communicating, but we need to do something. If this is in my building, and imagine other building in the Bronx that I have been doing home visit for more than 23 years as a social service worker. I know the Bronx, I know Brooklyn, I know many stuff, and this is very, very difficult for me, because if you see, the Lower East Side is changing, and the Alphabet City is not the Alphabet City that many years ago. There is a lot of people investing a lot of money in the Lower East Side. That means that I am even concerned in the future, if they will be removing also us from our building. There is a lot of stuff concerning Nacha, and we will continue working with Diana and Denise. We need to continue talking about the problem. I am not afraid. I am very vocal, and the point is to help people now with the situation that we are living right now in New York City. Thank
All
you so
right.
much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you a lot too. Now I'm not sure whether Devon is there or not. If he's not, we can go to Lonnie and come back to Devon. So we have Lonnie Wolf.
Oh, Devon is there.
Well, we can see you, but we can't hear you, sir. Got to unmute. Still can't hear you. See if you can get that unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now
Okay.
you're fine.
No, I had to charge the phone. My phone was dying.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Great.
well, you're on right now. You're on the actual show, so.
Oh, okay. Well, hello, my name is Devon Nash. My nephew and I, we are a part of HPD. The state pays $6,319.04 for my nephew and I, which I was asking for $2,500 for a 2-bedroom. And I'm like, you guys can actually save like $3,800. And they told me they would get back to me. And so I contacted Stephen Banks, because he's part of it. He's the head of it. He was appointed in 2013. And he basically hasn't been doing anything. And then when the program was created, the FEPS program was created in 2018. So far, out of 15,000 people, roughly only, out of 55,000 people, in the last 2.5 years, only 15,000 people exited out. And then some of them came back.
Devon?
Yes.
To be clear, when you say the
Nobody messed with my
initials
stick.
of the agency, can you tell people what it is? I don't think they know what
Oh,
you're,
I said HPD.
yes, say what that is.
Yeah. HPD. What is that acronym for? I can't remember what it stands for, but I know.
The homeless population. You're
Oh,
talking
yeah.
5,000 homeless people. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. Yes, that's exactly what it stands for.
And so you're in a hotel right now.
Yes. And it costs $6,319 for my nephew and I, and 4 cents. And that's what they've been paying for the last 3 years for my nephew and I. And that's well over $227,000. And I researched Housing Connect 2.0, and for a 2-bedroom condo, I see one for as low as 197,000 and as high as 217, and they still could have saved money. And that's basically every Sunday I'm down at Trinity Church, because Trinity Church, the board put together some type of proposal for the homeless. A lot of people that sits on the board at Trinity Church are contractors for the city, or they actually work directly for the city in some capacity. And it just seems to me that a lot of contracts are being steered toward whoever, their friends, and then their friends subcontract the work out or subcontract the contract out, and the third party, and sometimes which is us, we really get hardly nothing. And that's what it's basically been. And it just seems like the only people profiting are the hotels, and and these hotel owners are actually on certain boards on the city. So it's like they're getting favors, and there's nothing wrong with that, but at least do the right thing. And this is what a lot of problems that we're having, that people are not doing the right things. Over Christmas, $5 million was donated. And you figure with 5 boroughs to New York City, you figure with 5 boroughs, each borough could have got $1 million to feed the homeless for Christmas. Well, they only was able to feed 550 people. So I'm like, well, what the hell did they have for $5 million? 550 people, where did they eat? Because clearly, if you gave at least $200, $300, let's say $300 you spent on a meal for each person for Thanksgiving, clearly you would have got more than 550 people. I'm just saying now someone should ask, hey, so where did the money go? Like, okay, you had $5 million and you only fed 550 people. So what happened to the rest? No one's asking these hard questions. And, well, I did campaigning and I did fundraisers, things like that. So I kind of know that things have to be taken care of first, before other things. So if they raised, let's say, $5 million, but they spent $4 million to feed 550 people, it just kind of really didn't make sense. And a lot of things that go on with the city just don't make sense. And for the last 20 years, this has been a problem, and it's getting worse. So my question is, the politicians that's been around for the last 20 years, what were they doing? And since they know that this problem has been persisting, why weren't they doing something to stop this? You're just standing there pointing out, oh, this is a problem, but you've been part of that problem because you've been in the system, you've been working for over 20 years. Some have been in the system for over 40 years. And I'm like, but what have you actually done that made a significant change to and better enrich people's lives? And that's just the whole thing. It's just people just don't care about certain people, and that's wrong, because we're all human beings,
Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Lonnie Wolf, and then we're going to start the discussion among everybody. So is Lonnie on?
Yeah, I'm on, Dennis.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We don't have a video for you, huh?
No, you don't have a video.
Okay, well,
Just have
speak as the voice of someone's God.
I'm the ethereal voice. Okay. In answer to Devon's question, why haven't anybody done anything? Because this is the policy. It's not a mistake. It's the policy. It's the policy of Wall Street, and it's been the policy of those creatures that inhabit Wall Street for a lot longer than my association with Lyndon LaRouche, which is over 50 years now. Back in 1936, Franklin Roosevelt made a speech, a great New Yorker, Franklin Roosevelt, the President of the United States, said 1/3 of the nation is ill-housed, ill-clothed, and ill-fed. And then he went on to say that if that condition continued in a period of several years more and decades more, there would be no nation. That problem had to be addressed. At that point, the President of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt, with his team, put together an effort to try and build housing, including most of the housing units that were built for low-income and moderate-income families in New York, federally subsidized with credit given by the federal government, were built as a result of the initiatives of Franklin Roosevelt. Now, what's the problem? Nothing has been built for those people since, and no money was given to maintain these houses, right? You know what the things are called, the projects. I used to live I'm from New York. I'm a New Yorker. I grew up in Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn. Some of you may know where that is. I didn't live in the projects, but the projects were two streets over. This is already in the 1950s. By that time, the projects were falling apart. They had been built 20 years. They had not been maintained. Some of them were in better shape, but they were all falling apart. In other parts of the city, in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, in Ocean Hill, Brownsville, and Bedford-Stuyvesant, where there were projects, they were falling apart. They were all falling apart. They were all in need of federal or other funding to improve them. But what happened? The New York City Housing Authority was at that time what NYCHA took over the New York City Housing Authority, was bankrupt. Who bankrupted them? Wall Street. Wall Street was sucking money intended for the poor people out of maintenance and out of these other. This is why there is right now a massive housing shortage in New York City. The conditions that Jose was describing are the conditions not only of where there is a collapse in a wall. Many people are living in housing that should have been and would have been under somebody like Roosevelt condemned. No human being should live in these things. But the view of Wall Street is that people like you, people like me, are not human beings. We are what the Nazis used to call the useless eaters. And there has been an active plan which extends beyond New York City, but New York City was the center of it, to remove these people. What does that mean? Kill them if necessary, but otherwise force them out of the city. Back in 1965, there was a mayor, an evil son of a bitch, who was a former scion of a banking family that owned First National Bank. His name was John Lindsay, a liberal, a good liberal. He brought in with him a man by the name of Roger Starr as his housing commissioner. Roger Starr started working from the premise that we should eliminate the people who were living in low-income housing because they did not contribute to the city's wealth. Eliminate them. They're a cost. They're an overhead cost. Get rid of them. So he formulated a plan, which eventually he wrote about in a very famous New York Times Magazine front page article, which was a plan called Planned Shrinkage. He planned to shrink New York City. How did he propose to do it? And he said what we were going to do. He said, we will close fire stations and let sections of the city burn. We will close police stations and let populations in the city be terrorized into leaving. We will close schools and force families to make choices that they have to spend money to send their kids across town and so forth to school. We will close public facilities, including hospitals, so that people who get sick will die. Well, what did they do? In 1966 and 65, Lyndon LaRouche wrote a series of papers that forecast the end of the then existing monetary system, the Bretton Woods system, saying that it had strayed far from the intent of Franklin Roosevelt and others, and it had become a massive debt collection, debt farming, and basic austerity machine, which was self-cannibalizing, and that it was doomed to fall apart and fail and produce a global depression and crisis. In addition, he forecast that one of the largest debt bubbles of the time, the New York City debt bubble, I mean, I can go into more of it, but I won't for now. But just think about this. At that time, the money owed by the city of New York was the fourth largest amount owed by any entity in the world. Billions of dollars of debt had been accumulated over a period of 50 years, and it could not be paid. And Lynn said the two crises were linked, and they would blow up at some point, probably in the early 1970s. And as some of you who might be older will remember, they did in 1973, 74. The New York City debt crisis emerged, and the banks took over New York City. And at that point, the person who became the emperor of New York, right, a guy by the name of Felix Rohatyn, a banker from the banking families of Lazard Frères, the investment banking house based out of, primarily originated in Europe. Felix Rohatyn took over New York City for the banks, and he created the Municipal Assistance Corporation, so-called Big Mac, and the Emergency Financial Control Board. He took over the government functions of New York City. He is the person the budget had to be approved, and they systematically did all the things that Roger Starr, what did he become? At that point, he was the head of the editorial page. He was the editor of the editorial page of what? The New York Times, right? So here, the New York Times is the flagship newspaper of these people who are destroying New York. At the same time, you also had a lot of other things going on, right? Which some of you are familiar with. There used to be neighborhoods on the west side of New York City, right? A lot of poor people lived in those neighborhoods. They were some of the original tenements, some of them were slums. So a movement, a civic movement, led by New York bankers and backed by the person who was a planner for the state of New York and head of the Parks Commission, all this other fellow by the name of Robert Moses, right? They developed a plan for the West Side development. And a part of that plan was the building of a road, which, as you well know, never got built. A road called the Westway, right? It's supposed to be replaced the West Side Highway, which already in the 1970s was falling apart, right? So that road never got built, but the process of removing people from the west side of New York, along with the other process that had taken place earlier in the 1950s and early 1960s that built Lincoln Center, removed about 175,000 housing units from Manhattan. Now think about that, 175,000. You were taking away these housing units. What did you build to replace them? Well, go along the West Side Highway and you'll look up and you'll see the buildings of a high-rise, a high-income apartment buildings built by our former president, Donald Trump, who was one of the beneficiaries of this whole process. He built these high-rise houses, but they weren't for the people that had been removed. His father built low-income housing down in Lower Manhattan, a place that used to be called Stuyvesant Town, right? Donald Trump's father built that for middle-income and lower-income housing. Donald Trump never built anything for anybody but people who were rich. And those houses were never, the housing that was removed was never replaced. So you created this deficit in housing. There exists right now a massive deficit in New York City, which I intend to help Diane document, the massive deficit of housing in all the boroughs, not just Manhattan, where you have a combination of a lack of actual housing and substandard housing, housing that should have been torn down and replaced with more modern housing. We are probably, I don't want to throw out numbers, but we're talking about over 1 million units, 1 million housing units, 1 million apartments, 1 million any housing units for families to live in. This is not, we're not talking about the yuppie house, the redevelopment of the of the East Side and portions of Harlem and so forth, or over in Brooklyn and Brooklyn Heights. We're not talking about that kind of housing. We're talking about housing for people who are on this call, people what they're talking about. That's not being built. And this is what Diane is getting at. As long as Wall Street exists, and I mean Wall Street, I mean the power that is exemplified by the banking interests of Wall Street, which unfortunately, while we want to save commercial banking, the commercial banks are just as rotten and have to be fixed as the investment banks and the hedge funds and things like everything that you put together and you think of as Wall Street. The policy of this movement of Lyndon LaRouche going back as far as 50 years has been what? Shut it down. Wall Street is a parasite. As long as it exists, human beings' lives are going to consistently be threatened with extinction. The policy of the successive administrations that existed under Felix Rowan, right? All the mayors, they've been one disaster after another, with people like Giuliani being a terrible mayor that dismantled sections of the city, Bloomberg implementing this program of planned shrinkage and adding the aspects of green fascism to it as well. There hasn't been anybody, any leader, name one, who has stood up and resisted this. Yes, there have been some who have spoken out, but they have not been able to mobilize anything to stop this. Why? Because you cannot
summarize.
beat
You have to summarize.
I am. I'm done. I'm almost done. I'm very close to done. You cannot beat this in one city. You cannot even beat it in one country. You have to overturn the assumptions of the entire system that produces the idea that it's a good idea to eliminate population. If you that's what has to change, the belief in that system, and you need to replace it with a new system that thinks differently and puts value, real value, not on a monetary value, but a value on the creative potential of human beings.
Okay, let's get some responses. I obviously the last things we've just heard may put a certain context, but also obviously we heard a lot in the last 40 minutes. So Diane, let me go back to you first, and then we'll see whether Maria's got something, or Jose, or Devon. So go ahead.
Thanks, Lonnie. I think this is really this question of culture, and one of the reasons why FDR promoted the Pecora Commission, Ferdinand Pecora, this swarthy Sicilian prosecutor who went after these bankers and actually put people in jail because, like today, they said, oh, well, it's just those lazy people who don't want to work. It's just those no good, whatever. They don't want to think about why people would be homeless, for example, why many of the people in the shelters are actually working, but you cannot afford to pay for rent on an average wage, certainly not rent in New York City. So the point is everybody's got it backwards, and the bailouts, you want to complain about so-called communism or socialism, there's nothing criminal about wanting to see to it that people who are poor have health care or have housing. And not only that, the universe is created in such a way that if you don't look out for the people who are poor, you will discover that you yourself don't survive, as we're seeing with the COVID pandemic, where the countries which are impoverished, and also some that are not, like the US and most of Western Europe, who've been rather insane about this. But if you do nothing to address this in poor countries, then you get all kinds of new strains because the virus mutates. You get more contagious strains. Hopefully, we're not going to get more deadly strains, but we very well could. In fact, that's probably even likely. And we have such a broken down, disordered economic system that they are having a hard time distributing the vaccine, although it was somewhat of a miracle that it was developed this quickly. They're not getting it distributed very well. So there has to be a change in the way everybody thinks about this. There is nothing sacred about money. Money itself has no intrinsic value. Lyndon LaRouche said money is an idiot. You don't need money. If you were stranded on a desert island, what would you rather have? A suitcase full of $100 bills or clean water and food? Or how about electricity? So, and where does money come from? It's an invention of human beings. And we, therefore, can control how it's used. So you should think about it a little bit. Somehow they come up with trillions upon trillions of dollars if a major hedge fund or Bank of America or Wells Fargo, somehow had a bad gambling debt. And of course, with Glass-Steagall, these banks wouldn't be allowed to gamble and they have to be bailed out. But you say we need X billion dollars worth of renovations and new housing in New York City. And they say, oh no, we can't figure out how to pay for that. We have no money for that. It's completely arbitrary and has nothing to do with money, and it's criminal. Now, what I wanted to say is one thing about China, because as people may know, in the 1960s, China was horribly impoverished. You had the Cultural Revolution under Mao Zedong. You had horrible oppression. Beethoven was banned. Confucius was banned. The intellectuals were sent out to hard labor in the fields or stuck in prison. And since the death of Mao and the end of that, around 1976 or so, China has very willfully and deliberately reversed those oppressive measures. They do not have a limit on how many children you can have anymore, for example. Confucius is back. Beethoven is back in a very big way. And they just this year completed the eradication of extreme poverty. They've lifted 850 million people out of extreme poverty. And they are on a trajectory to double the GDP and double the average income of the average person by 2035. For Americans, that's unimaginable. If you can imagine the purchasing power of your dollar or what you can pay for with 40 hours of work suddenly doubling, and what that would mean. Now, of course, it doesn't mean much if we don't also build a modern new high-speed rail system, nuclear power plants, build modern, clean, new cities, all of which we could be doing. And in fact, we could take the pandemic as the opportunity to recognize that our previous economic policies were idiotic. We have far too many people employed as massage therapists, tattoo parlors, personal training, and I'm not against personal training, but all of these sort of informal jobs where we need people to actually be building things that totally transform the standard of living. And not only that, these jobs are not they're not gigs, they're careers where you come in on a low level, you learn a skill. As you become more skilled, you're able to teach people. You can become a supervisor, you can become a manager, or you need to change your skill set because the company develops a more advanced level of technology. So you're always learning, you're always developing, and this is a career, and you're at this firm 35 years. And it covers your health insurance, and you can pay your rent and mortgage in 1 week's wages. People can't even imagine that now. But there's no reason why we couldn't be living that way. And actually what Mr. LaRouche proposed was a 40-year program to put a manned colony on Mars. And he said over that time, the average person's income would increase by an order of magnitude, that is tenfold. And that means your purchasing power, not hyperinflation. So as down as we are, what's really criminal about this is none of it is necessary, but we have a job to do in educating our fellow citizens so that people know what to demand, not only what they don't like, but what has to be done.
Okay. Maria, you have anything you want to say at this point?
At this point, with all the information that we got this tonight, I have been in the field for many years, working uh, with program that we were helping people with housing issue. I have been in the Bronx. I believe that I know all the public housing. What I see is like as a professional that I decided to come from the Dominican Republic, getting degree, associate degree, master degree, to see myself in this situation, not because of the COVID, because that's the place that I decide to live. That's the place that I love. I love the Hudson River. I love the park. I love the Lower East Side. Right now, with the information that the sir gave it to me, I am scared. I don't want to move from my building. My desire is to continue making money and to continue paying my rent, living a normal life, continue enjoying the city that I really love, the place that I decide to raise my children. We need to continue learning the information that everybody's giving us, and we need to continue fighting with that. That belief that is not fair, because this is me with 2 children. But what about those senior that they are living here with nobody, even that they are not visiting? What about my neighbor who died? I don't know how, and we realized because thanks God that her sister came. What about the children that every morning they had to go through all the pee, the urine, and the feces from any homeless? What about like a case that we have, and I believe it's in 7th floor, that the lady killed her little child in McDonald's in 34th Street many years ago, and later nobody knows what's going on because nobody is paying attention to what's going on in our buildings. There is a lot of people like me that they are paying. I have been paying a lot of money. My son all the time have fighting with me, mommy, when you are working, you're supposed to buy a house. I say, no, that's the place that I want to live. I want to continue making money. I don't really care how much money that I had to pay, but I feel happy. If I feel happy and the city the government was helping in the beginning when I decided to go to a school and get my education. Now it is my time to repay to the city that I love. And I want to do this being happy. I don't want to continue moving to my country or moving to another place. No, I love the Lower East Side. And that's the place that I decide to live. And I will be continue living here. But I want to continue living here with my neighbor. This that I have, so many people low income, but they are nice. They love me. I love them. There is a lot of senior with 90, 90 that they all the time are sharing stories how the building was so clean in the beginning. I have a dream in my mind that I want to see the front of the building clean, completely clean, with a little just a painting. It will be fine. I want to continue seeing my building without garbage, because if the health department say that the place that they were using before that there was like almost on the sidewalk, how they are putting the garbage in front of the building. I see the night shift workers working so hard every day, like 3 days before. They were working 48 hours that I even called the community health because they were frustrated, they were angry. And there is a lot of stuff that we have to come as a community, as a New Yorker, that we need to stop and say, what's going on here? We need to talk. We need to came to the agreement. We need to make sure that everybody know who are the people who are living in Niger. I am a professional. I am living in Niger. I see a lot of Chinese that you only see them in the morning and during the night. There is a lot of people working and paying a lot of money in Niger. We need clear water. We need to see all our world. We have a lot of issue with our linking in all these buildings, and I believe that I am very frustrated because we need to do something. And as the person I spoke tonight, I am more scary. I don't want to move. I don't want to see my senior moving from our building. I don't want to see the alphabet city that they will go now because they have money and they have to move. No, nobody is moving anywhere. We will continue fighting. We will be engaging our residents. We will be also educating our residents that this is the public housing, this is the subsidy that we are receiving. We need to pay our rent on time. When everything go back to normal, we need to come as community, to come as community, to protect what we already have. We are not giving up. We are not giving this to nobody. We will be continue fighting for that. And I am here in order to represent many people that they don't speak English, that they are afraid because they have mental health issue, because they have a drug issue, they have alcohol issue. My building will not be like the place that drug dealers are coming and do whatever they want. Not in my view. Not in my eyes. We have to continue doing what we are doing. And thank you, Diane and Dennis, for giving the opportunity to use this forum and to talk about issue that is not affecting only Maria. It's affecting to too many people.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Jose for a minute, but before we get there, let me say the following. There was once in New York City where this kind of thing was not tolerated because the party structure that we're talking the 1940s, the 50s, the Democratic Party had an actual structure, had precinct committees, and it had clubhouses, and it had people who were elected to the county committee, and they would do things to make sure that these kinds of matters could not be uh, arbitrarily imposed on people. And that structure was broken down during the period of the early 60s, actually started in the early 50s. I won't go through the whole destruction of that story, but there was a man by the name of Hewlin Jack, who was the first African American borough president of Manhattan. It's appropriate to bring him up here, both because of what we're talking about, also because of the fact of it being, Black History Month and so on. And Hewlin was in charge of a 2,000-person maintenance team, which had its own cement factory and so forth in the city to take care of all the streets of Manhattan. You didn't have potholes. You didn't have the kind of crevices and cracks and so on. And the maintenance of the streets was something that you could see. The equipment had his name on it. Manhattan Borough Maintenance, Hewlin Jack, Borough President. He worked with us from 1980 to 1986 when he died. And he wrote a book, his autobiography. And he talked about many things in that book, including his confrontation with Robert Moses, who was talked about before. But the key idea that he had, and he talked about at the time, was the idea of the unity of people and the ability of people, particularly because they were diverse, particularly because they came from all kinds of different countries as well as cultures, that they could unify and work together. Now, that is not a dream. That's something that can be accomplished and can be achieved. It's something that we need to talk about a lot more and a lot further, maybe at another time. So, Jose, let me go to you. Or actually, let me ask if Devon is around. Is Devon there? Okay, if he's not there, Jose, let's go to you.
Okay, hello, hi, yes. So I hope you can hear me properly.
Devon will come back to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So I hope I can be heard properly. One of the perks of living in the Bronx is you get access to free music. Right now, my neighbors are blasting some cumbia, and I could get up and dance right now, but I don't think anybody came here to see that. I do get a little emotional talking about housing, and not because I have a personal connection to it, but because it's about dignity of people. It's about how do people see themselves? How do people see each other as human beings? And I do believe that over the last 80 years, the idea of what a human being even is has so eroded and corroded that people see each other as ugly and no longer worth protecting or even being able to worth having proper housing. And I think it's tragic that people always have to reaffirm what their rights are, that people have to reaffirm their dignity, and that people have to reaffirm what they're entitled to and what they're what they're entitled to, which is proper housing, 3 meals a day, and a house that won't collapse on you. I mean, it's ridiculous that people have to just that has to be even said, that it's not obvious, that it's not implied, that. And so yeah, I do feel a little emotion that I try to kind of direct into a bigger idea, into a bigger goal, because Diane's campaign, and she's running for Senate, and she's running as a senator for New York, but her decisions as a senator will affect the whole country and possibly even the whole world. So I can't get caught up in my own life. I can't get caught up in my own personal experience, because I believe that every single human being is worth proper housing and worth 3 meals a day, because that's just what it means to be human, that you have a certain dignity. And I don't know why that has to be said, and I don't know why that has to be argued about. I don't know why that has to be proven. Oh, you have to prove to me that I'm capable of genius. You have to prove to me that people are better, because I get in discussions all the time with people my age. I'm 22, where they tell me they don't think people are worth keeping around, that there might be too many of us, or that sex work is just as a legitimate career as being a neurosurgeon. I mean, it is completely benign. It's insane that people could even consider that. And yet that's what people really think. That's what people really believe. So it's bad what people believe about human beings, but I am inherently optimistic about those same people, no matter how flawed their thinking may be about people. I love them because they are beautiful. And I know what creative potential and genius lies in everyone, no matter how old they are. I genuinely do believe that. And that's why, I think Diane should be senator, because I think she reflects that too. So that's all I have to say. That's my only response.
Yeah. Devon, we're back to you if you're there. We'll give you a minute to unmute.
Yeah, hello. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi.
Good.
About what's his name? Moses. I did a report on him, and Moses actually they systematically burned down the Bronx because the World Series was going on around that time, and Mother Teresa came to the Bronx to witness what was going on there. And so, back to what you were saying, there have been about elimination of people and pushing people out. The BQE was built just for that, to push the people from the city to the suburbs and put the people into the projects and those crumbling down projects, and they're still there. But now that the people in the suburbs are coming back to the city, now they want those apartments back. And so now they're fixing up everything and they're kicking people out. And that's what I'm going through right now. It's like, there's available apartments. There's over 15,000 available apartments in New York City right now. And so there's no reason why those apartments shouldn't be filled. There are spaces, there are factories, there are, large buildings that can be converted into, because look at the Navy Yard. Look what they did to the Navy Yard. So it's not like the space isn't available, but it's just, the thing is holding the people accountable, because you knew what you were doing back then and you're still alive and you're still profiting off of what you did. Now it's going to be hard to, actually pinpointing who did it, but we know it happened. And that right there in itself needs to be recognized and it needs to be rectified, because damage was done, and we are the products of that. I lived in Crown Heights. I moved in 1980, and it was a beautiful neighborhood at the time. And 3 years later, crack had destroyed my neighborhood. It destroyed it. And the people that were living there had to move out, and then it sat dormant for about 10, 15 years. And then come 2000, everything is starting to bustle up, and the regentrification, and now the rent is going up. And now you go down Franklin Avenue, and it's like you somewhere in San Francisco or somewhere, or in Italy somewhere. It's like, my God, I lived over here and none of this stuff was here when I was here. In fact, you did everything in your power. You took the supermarkets out of the neighborhood. You took the mom and pop stores out of the neighborhood. You did everything in your power, and then you flooded my neighborhood with drugs and guns. You did that systematically. That was systematically done. So there is some truth to what you're saying about people being killed. And then it's okay, well, we'll throw them in jail, and we'll, privatize the prisons, and we'll make a ton of money off the prisons. Our government had federal prisoners making pins for guns, firing pins for guns, chips for missiles, things like that, at pennies on the dot, but pennies for an hour, literally 16, 17 cents an hour. And right in California, it's worldwide. This is not a secret. So these things were done, systematically done. And okay, now we need to hold these people who did these things, hold them responsible, because you profit off of this and you knew what you were doing. And statistics show, we have case studies, it's impossible for them to do something without knowing what the ramifications are. And you knew what the ramifications were, and you still did it anyway. And we're still feeling those ripples today. Some of the crimes that these kids are committing, well, they were born on crack. A lot of them were born on crack. So their capacity to reason, to think, or anything like that, it's out the window. It's out the window. And the same officers were from the 20s and 30s and 40s. Well, a lot of these officers and firefighters and these positions were handed down. So they were taught these things to be racist and to hold people back. It's just a systematic way of doing things. And they were taught that, and they profited off it. A lot of people profited off of it. And now, we're saying today, that's not okay. What you did back then is not okay. And there are people still alive from the ramifications from behind what you did. It's no different from the Holocaust. I don't want to compare the two, but to me, it's worse than the Holocaust, because in the Holocaust, you were killing people, but with us, the poor people, you either breeding us to be poor and to work for cheap labor and to live in shitty neighborhoods and eat the trash food. This is what we're bred for. You're literally breeding us for this. You're making our school system suck. Our kids, even if they get a high school diploma, they can't even read. So what the hell are they getting a high school diploma for? They're still at a disadvantage. So, we can no longer keep our eyes closed. We can no longer act like these things doesn't exist. And, it's easy to trace, because some of the people that's been in office for a long time, well, they were in office when these things were going on, especially the Giuliani administration. And he was just one reckless thug, but he's going to get his, because he was supposed to do what he was supposed to do for Trump, and he didn't do it. And now they're all going to flip on him, and watch, all his little dirty secrets is going to come out. But a man that will leave his wife with cancer for his mistress, and then his mistress turn around and leave him. So he doesn't really have too much luck. He's a real weasel. No, for real.
He's not good at much of anything.
He's not. No, he's not. He's not. He's a weasel. He's a weasel. He's it's not. You get what you get with him. For real, you get what you get. You get what you get, and he.
let me just do this. While I don't mean to interrupt you as such, but because of time, we're going to let Lonnie have something to say because we got to actually close out. So Lonnie, if you now that you've heard all this, if you have a response to it, and you should be brief as well, then we'll give Diane a chance to wind us out of here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I want to make sure I wasn't muted. No, Darren is right, man. That passion that you feel is what it's going to take back both New York City, take back the country. I mean, the fact is this, they're interrelated. You can't save New York without saving the country, but you damn sure can't save the country if you don't save New York. New York is the country's first city. And they're doing this. The key is what you're asking the question, really, Devin, and so is Maria. You're saying, who is responsible for this? Who is responsible? We need to hold somebody responsible, and then we need to force a change in policy. That's what it all comes down to. Well, the people who are responsible are the people who run Wall Street. That's a simple fact. It can be proven. We can document it. But you have to accept certain things that you've been suckered and, hoodwinked and otherwise bamboozled about a lot of things. The politicians are not the only people responsible. For the most part, they're a bunch of flunkies. And man, back when, the stuff was going on with Big Mac, you had this mayor, this little guy named Abe Bean. I don't know if you remember, a little guy. He was like 5'2", right? And he wasn't a bad guy, but he was browbeaten and like literally threatened by these bankers. He didn't stand up to them. He didn't rally the people. See, this is where Diane's campaign comes in. If you're going to fight these people, you have to give the little guy, the people like you and all the other people, the idea you're not really little people. Because that's what, over the last more than 50 years, most of us have been told, hey, you guys are a bunch of little people. You don't matter. What you think doesn't matter. It's the people with money that matter, and you're never going to be able to challenge them. So in a certain sense, people back down. They didn't do anything. They stopped fighting. And as Dennis was pointing out, there used to be a structure within which you could fight, right? There used to be the Democratic Party, mostly. Sometimes the Republican Party, but almost never. Mostly the Democratic Party. It had a structure. You could go to your clubhouse. You could go to your ward leader. You could go to your representative, your city councilman, and you could get something done if you came with enough people. That whole system is broken down. We're not going to be able to rebuild the system as such, but we have to rebuild the sense in the citizen that this country belongs to you. It doesn't belong to Donald Trump. It doesn't belong to Joe Biden. It doesn't belong to any of those people. It belongs to you. It's your country. It's your city. And the powers that you're fighting can be beaten. That was the message that Mr. LaRouche gave all of us. That was the hardest thing for a lot of us to accept, the idea that you could actually win. Was it easy to see that you could lose, right? I mean, you get your head beaten in, you could wind up dead. It's easy to see you could lose. It was hard to see that you could actually win under these circumstances. And we can win with people like Diane providing a certain level of leadership, with programs that can solve these problems, that we can ram down the throats of people who have claimed they have the power, but they don't have the power unless you cede it to them. Because the Constitution of this country, the United States, gives the people the power. Not to be stupid, but with responsibility, it gives them the power. Not to go and run around and riot and do all sorts of crazy stuff, because that doesn't get you anywhere. But the power to act from a standpoint of reason to change policy. And that's what this campaign is going to be about. It's going to be, we are going to fight those people who think that you are deplorables, not needed, useless eaters. And we are going to hold them accountable for what they think and what they've done to New York City, to New York State, to this country. And if we do that, we're going to win.
So Diane, I think it's about time for you to summarize, and we'll dismiss everybody at
Well,
that.
first, I really want to thank everybody, Lonnie, Devon, Jose, Maria, and Dennis, for being on. And I appreciate your courage and your passion and not trying to sugarcoat it or act like it doesn't mean something when you're watching, for example, Maria, what you described with Danny. You're watching a person being killed in front of you. And it's sick. And I was, Helga Zepp LaRouche, LaRouche's widow, is Devon, and she raised this question of the Nazi Holocaust because she said this was something deeply disturbing to her growing up in Germany, as to think about how could you have a nation that produced Beethoven and Schiller and Bach and Humboldt and all of these incredibly beautiful geniuses who loved mankind, but in that very nation have Adolf Hitler and the Holocaust. What happened? And clearly there was an international effort which Prescott Bush, Montague Norman, the head of the Bank of England, were involved in funding and propping up Hitler. But why did the population go along with it? And there was a risk, but the risk became greater the more they went along with it. They could have stopped it earlier, but they didn't. A few people very courageously resisted at great, some of them lost their lives, others suffered consequences at great risk. And I think this is something that really one of the reasons I joined Mr. LaRouche is I was very concerned about starvation and poverty all over the world. And I didn't realize it was a deliberate policy. I was naive. I thought, oh, well, they just had a drought or there's some terrible problem in these countries. When it became clear to me that this was deliberate, which it is, it's not an accident. They're not accidentally killing people. They intend to kill people. And we have a situation right now where 260 million people on the planet face death by starvation in the near term. Now, what does it take to cure starvation? Food. That's not even difficult. So if these people die, it's on us because we didn't lift a finger to do the obvious. And the young people of the United States, rather than sitting around and being pessimistic, could be mobilized to address this, to address the COVID crisis and like a health care CCC, but also food, sanitation. We could have an army of young people go into these NYCHA buildings and clean things up and transform the place. But who would lead that? Who would demand it? So I think that the first question, in a sense, is to challenge the way people think and to not let ourselves be behavior modified, because clearly right now what the news media, these billionaire crooks from the City of London, Wall Street, Hollywood, and the social media have tried to do is put us in a box and prevent us from thinking certain things and try and make us forget that we are human beings. But we are not going to forget that. And the problem they have, people who are evil, well, people who are evil, you might notice they've been doing the same thing for centuries. They don't have new tricks. They don't come up with new things. So they can be beaten, not because we have more money or we control the media, but because we are more creative than they are. So I think this discussion we've had tonight is actually very important because I think we have great power from an area that they don't expect, which is human reason, and it has nothing to do with what social, where you are in our crazily stratified society. So I'm really actually very happy about this discussion. I think we have great potential to straighten out this country, and I think everyone here is not going to give up, and that's why we're going to succeed.
Well, I would just like to say I think that suffices for a summary. I don't think I have anything I need to add. I want to again thank Maria Tejada, Jose Vega, Devon Nash, Lonnie Wolf, and I also want to thank the technical crew. Jenny Burns is there, who has been working, and also Kynan Thistlethwaite, who are working behind the scenes assiduously to keep this all going. We had a couple of technical problems at the beginning, but we triumphed. And I would just invite everybody to tune in tomorrow, actually at 2 p.m. The LaRouche organization will be doing a webcast then, and we'll be talking about this report we've referenced, which has a kind of preliminary title like The Secrets Known Only to the Inner Elite, The Great Reset. If you find that intriguing, tune in tomorrow at the LaRouche organization, again at 2 o'clock. And otherwise, you want to get in touch with the campaign, go to the DianeSarah.com and just basically also tell everybody about this Friday symposium. We're here every Friday night talking about these kinds of questions. And more importantly, we're putting together our campaign organization piece by piece. What we want New Yorkers just like the ones you just heard. That's the basic glue that we're going to form. Some of us who have enough of a memory about those earlier times in New York City know something about how to get the attention of the establishment. And we know something about how to get the attention, more importantly, of the people to have their voices heard. And so that's what we're going to do with this campaign. So on behalf of the New York Symposium with Diane Siri, we want to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll see you again here next week.